Hey.
Good morning. Welcome, Sharon, to the first podcast that's been dreamt into creation. And no surprise, you are the one to help make this a reality for the Moksha Group. The Moksha Institute is a group of committed global citizens that are working to create more peace and harmony and love in the world, specifically by changing the way that we work, by bringing in opportunities to love more, to grow, to outgrow ourselves, and to create transformation that changes the world. And we've been at this work now for about 11 years. And we've been dreaming up this podcast for quite a long time. And it's called Leading from the Heart. And the idea of this podcast is to share inspirational stories with inspirational people that courageously choose to love and live with their heart, both in business and in life. And the purpose, again, is just to hear these stories to help us awaken and learn some tools along the way, including things from neuroscience and the wisdom traditions that we can bring into our own heart and out into our world. And so today we welcome one of my favorite people in the whole wide world, Sharon Oxendine. She said yes, so I'm so grateful for that. She's a proud First Nations woman from the Lumbee tribe in North Carolina. She has studied, and I would say lived, the Native and Indigenous teachings for over 30 years. She recently created an amazing nonprofit for sacred land called Medicine Wheel Way in the Blue Ridge Mountains of West North Carolina, where she currently resides. And I've had the luck to be at that property, and it is sacred and beautiful. And she does amazing work for the community and world citizens there as well. Sharon is a sacred pipe carrier, and she works in her community to provide ceremonies celebrating life, transitions, and big and little transitions, and also helping us to move through grief, which allows on the other side of the grief just such great joy and a big yes to the next thing. Sharon provides ceremonies and rituals. She does land blessing, rites of passage, soul retrievers, and she also works with communities and individuals and organizations providing support and fellowship for people in recovery, which is especially close to my heart. She has studied with many Indigenous teachers around the world, including the late Malidoma Some. Is that right, Sharon?
Correct. That's correct.
And he is from West Africa? Or he is
West Africa.
Where is he from again?
He was from West Africa.
I hope we could hear a little bit about that in the journey. Your study is there. And
I hope so too.
To his village. She studied with shamanic teachers as well. And she's been initiated into the medicine lodge of Jade Great. And she was named an elder by her community in 2009. So we are so honored, blessed. I don't know what I did to deserve your presence, but I am just so grateful to have you here to share. So thank you so much, Sharon.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's an honor to me. And also knowing the work that you do, we have collaborated in the past, and our work is very much integrated and weaves into the same mission, I believe. So I'm really glad to be here. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. So I just want to ask you just to start sharing a bit about your personal journey into what allows you to continuously lead from this heart-centered place and work in life. And then, how this heart type of leadership, this deep devotion of heart has translated into your work and any outcomes you want to share. So please, the field is yours to share.
Okay, well, thank you. Well, I do believe that even as a young child, growing up, whenever we visited, Lumberton, North Carolina is my home. That's where my reservation is. It's in the southeastern part of North Carolina, one of the largest tribes in the southeast, not federally recognized, but state recognized at this point. But growing up in as a person in an Indigenous community, I got to see other people like me when I was younger. My grandparents were very much very much embedded as service and pretty much gatekeepers to the community. And, anything that happened, they were always there. Somebody, had a loss or somebody celebrating something. So it kind of was embedded in me early, and I loved that feeling of community, of being around each other, having fun, laughing, creating songs, doing silly things, but always being connected. And as I went on in life, I really continued to long for that type of connection. So when I was about 30 years old, I started off on a seeking path, and it brought me to Asheville. And just to be able to say that between those years and the last 30 years, traveling to Africa, experiencing a near-death experience, all of those things added up to a place where I feel very much like it is my life's work to give back to the community, to show people that there is a way we can still connect, especially in the Western world, where it's not quite the thing that people do all the time, but making time for that. And my work is to be able to allow people to have a place to come and do that, so that they see that they can still be in their world, but step into this world and be able to have some healing from this type of work.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit for people who, are curious? Can you give a couple of examples of like what the work is and what it's like and how you lead people into their heart? It sounds like, it's not just leading people into their own heart, but it's through community. People are able to do this bigger healing work so they can go back and serve. So any unique approaches, that to help people understand what it is that you specifically do, or
Sure.
Picture.
Yeah. So a lot of the ceremonies that I have learned and worked with, and I put some of my teachers here around me, their books anyway. This is the Healing Wisdom of Africa from Malidoma Somé. So from Malidoma's work, I took many important ceremonies, but one of the most important ones was the rock or mineral ceremony. And this is a ceremony that allows people to come together and be able to look at what their purpose is, celebrate that in a community, look deeply into each other's eyes, and recognize who they are through a very practical, kind of very earthy ceremony. People at first are very reluctant to do this ceremony because you're not talking. This is all about connection by spirit to spirit. But it was what Malidoma called the ceremony that allows us to look into our bones, because we consider minerals or rocks to be the bones of Mother Earth. So Malidoma always said those bones hold so much information for us. Being able to tap into that for each of us allows us to step into that place of what is deeply in our bones for us to do. What have our ancestors integrated into our body and into our spirit that we're here to work on? So that's one of the things that I can say that has become something that I bring to lots of communities. Is people call it the rock ceremony, or it's called by African name the mineral ceremony. At Medicine Wheel Way, we have some ceremonies that are ongoing. One of them is a sweat lodge, and I work with one of my medicine partners, Grandmother Red Hawk, who pours water. And we work together because sweat lodges take a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of energy. But it is a place where we bring all the elements together: earth, water, air, and fire. It is a place to us that is much like going to church, but it's a connection that's very deep and it's very intimate. So I have found that the community here has received that really well and is always asking us when we're going to have our next sweat lodge. During COVID, we had to shut down just like everybody else did, as ceremonies were not being done, and especially the sweat lodge wasn't being done. But when we started back, people turned out in groves. So
Yeah, I just want to comment first on the mineral or the rock ceremony I was lucky enough to be part of. And I do recall going through that ceremony where you are kind of face to face, silent with people. And I remember at one point in particularly, like when you get into that deep healing space by the space that you create and hold, I could literally see like other souls, like other people showing up through the eyes of this woman I did not know, my grandmother, my aunt, deep, almost like the ancestral line showing up for me, which, not knowing much about your work, that was quite overwhelming and beautiful experience to have. And so I just want to share it is quite transformational, and it deepens, as you hold. And that's what I think you're a great holder of space for transformation. I also want to share, ask you a question. One of the things that I'm struck by with you is I think there's a hesitancy in people on some level to ask to participate in ceremonies, especially if it's from a different culture, or if it's being honored by a tradition that has experienced a lot of oppression. And so on some level, we have corporations doing things like doing ayahuasca or, mushrooms together in some of the extremes, medicine journeys. And at the same time, we're becoming aware of cultural appropriation, even permission to be participating. And I want to just have you speak around kind of how you are a master in some ways of just, you're so open to allowing people from different faiths to come and learn, whether they're with a team or a corporation or individual souls just coming up from different backgrounds. So anything you want to share around that, I would love the community to hear your response.
that's a really good question, and I appreciate that you would ask it. I have to be really honest and vulnerable here. When I first started out in this work and when I was approaching my teachers, there were many times, and I remember sitting in circle and saying, I am very angry at this world, at what they have done to my people, all of our First Nations people. And this was 30 some years ago. And I had a very wise Indian woman who was from the Mohawk Nation who told me, you will never be able to do this work unless you can forgive everyone and understand that when people come towards us to learn this, they are bringing their very best and their heart, and they want to learn it so they can support us and be a part of us all going together. I believe we're moving towards a place. We might not see this. I might not live to see this, but we're headed, our world is headed towards a place where there's not going to be a big difference. We're all going to be integrated. The colors are going to be so integrated. The First Nations people, a lot of our people of color, are so integrated now into other communities, into other cultures. And that's, I had to work on that. What I'm getting to say is that I had to work on forgiveness. I had to forgive what other people and their ancestors have done and realize, and it's true, when people show up from ceremonies, they're always very respectful. And if they're not, if they do something that is not in line with what I would have them do, I can tell them in a gentle way. I don't have to embarrass anyone or make them ashamed of it. I don't usually try not to put a lot of rules out there or things that people have to do. One of the things that we're really, Native people are really proud of is our ceremonies, our rituals, and what we do as far as like smoking a pipe. But we don't ever tape those kind of things. And I'm always having people ask me, can we tape you? Can we and I always say no. My teachers told me no, that it's more than just taking the medicine away from us. It's about humility. It's about me staying right sized. It's about me understanding as an elder, it doesn't mean that I am here to be first. As a matter of fact, most elders are at the end of the line. We are here to serve the community. That means that our people, we're here to feed our communities and make sure they eat first. Because when our community is healthy and they are full of spiritual food, they will take care of the elders. And Malidoma always said, elders will live longer the more a community takes care of them. And so whenever we have a community, I always remind people when we have community gatherings, I'm here to serve you. I'm here to make sure that what you want to do in life, that you're able to do that. And I'm going to give you some things that will support you in doing that, whether that's your career or your family, growing your family, finding a mate. There's so many people that are looking for partners now, are looking for healthy partners, looking for to have a family of their own, or to create something in their work. That's what I'm here to do, is make sure the community is thriving. When the community thrives, we all thrive. And that's what eldership is about.
I love that. How, for all the leaders listening, who are thinking, how do I, so on one level, leaders listening, aspiring leaders, they can find the appropriate way to reach out and do the personal work. So much of the way we show up is how we heal the invisible, what's under the surface, our histories, the things that are our unconscious agreements that we make. And so by being in community, I think we're able to heal quicker, faster. That's been my journey. So we outwardly show up in a more effective way with the people we care about, and we can manifest more. But if you're working, with an established group and you're taking them through a ceremony, whether it's the pipe ceremony or it's the rock ceremony or sweat lodge, what is that transformation like when you have a group of people who have existing relationships that might have, maybe some difficulty there? So, because we work with difficult teams who might have difficult experiences and histories, and ceremony has a totally different way of helping people. You're not talking about stuff all the time. You're not applying it with the head, but any wisdom you can share about how this is so transformational. What's actually happening? What do you think is actually happening to groups of people when they go through these things together?
Well, it's my belief, and I've seen it happen, because, I not only, hold space and containers for people to do this work, I have done the work too, and sometimes at a more radical level. And I realize that sometimes people are not ready for that. But say you're going to do an earth ritual with a group of people, and this is where we are digging some actual graves where people are laid into these graves. The earth comes up to their neck. They stay in there as long as they feel like they need to. There's something that happens whenever people are exposed to elements on that level that allows for a level of vulnerability that we don't get when we're sitting in a group, in an office, on the grid somewhere, or when we don't see people in their struggle or who they are in their humanness. Because what happens when you do these types of rituals, you will start to see someone come into a vulnerable state, and you begin to understand, wow, that person's got some real struggles there. And I wasn't connecting with them on the right level, because here they are showing up to this work and really trying to do it, but they've got some issues that are going on in their life that they, don't feel good about themselves, or, they don't feel good about who they are or how they show up. But yeah, when we start to do this type of work, that vulnerability is going to come out. And it's really not me. I really believe it's exposure to those elements, because earth, air, fire, and water are our basic parts of this Mother Earth. And those were the things that First Nations people, Indigenous people realized these were the things that we were born into, and they were here to help us and to help us, be able to grow and connect. So that's what I see it happen all the time. I've seen people come together, do a ceremony, and start, to either cry together or laugh together or understand a little bit more about who the human person is. Because at some point, we are all here wanting to belong, be a part of, be needed, be, recognized. And that's what ceremony and circle allows us to do. Rituals allow us to do, is to come together and belong to something bigger than ourselves.
Gosh, that's so beautiful. I really, just even reflecting on the opportunities I've had to, be in your circles, just really life changing in so many ways. And I would describe it as deep bone softening, like the armor softens, the tears aren't like, for me, out of control sobbing that I'm embarrassed about later. It's like a soft trickling of just like and it's mixed with a feeling of old grief kind of washing, but also like longing, like not even knowing what I was missing, and I think feeling so grateful to be part of these experiences you create, because that deep longing we feel with TV, substance, food, sex, all the things. And then on the other side of it, sometimes there's still a feeling of emptiness, that short-term fix. And I would say, doing group ceremony with you, in, small team settings that we've done together, but also in the broader community, there's a deep filling of spirit, of connection with all around. And that's kind of transformational, because it turns down the volume on the looking for something that is always fleeting. So
right.
I just wanted to share that. That's what my experience has been. And I do think that, the amount of work, and my teachers would always say, you can only bring people as far along as you've done the work for. And
that's
because
right.
you've done such deep personal work, and you still are doing it, you can bring people who are pretty far along on their path, people who've been, doing meditation for 20 years, or other people who have their own healing path, and you can still bring them to that next level. It's been my experience. So
right.
I appreciate that you're doing that for the world.
Yes.
What practical, so I hear on one of these, people can come and get off the grid to be in community, to do this personal work with intact groups, or just showing up as an individual. And also, what are some practical everyday things that, whether you're a parent, a church leader, but when you do have power over people, you're making decisions about healthcare, wages, whether people keep their jobs, how you lead, how your company interacts with the environment. You have even like more need, because you're a decision maker and influencer in some way, to keep that heart open, because your decisions have a big spreading effect. And so just any insight, tips around living in this modern world that people can, come back to their heart through any of the wisdom practices you have that are more day to day.
Right. Yeah. And I always said, what I always called it is the urban medicine person's, personal path, a daily reprieve, if you would call it something like that. But being able to, for me, it always starts with, I think it's really good if you can find a way to step out on the earth every day. And that's what I do, is I step outside. I do some smudging with some sage. If that's not your practice, but at least stand on the earth and just, draw that breath in and be able to connect with the elements. The other thing, that I really believe helps is people having a personal altar. And on that altar, being able to even, I've had people start to set up ancestor altars, pictures of their ancestors or people they're connected to in their family lineage. Because First Nations people, we're not the only people with ancestors. We all have ancestors, and we all have people that we need to honor those cultures and those traits where we come from. And on that altar, you might have some things that might be water, and they might be, specific things that mean something to you, so that you can connect with memories each day as you start out that are really good memories, or things, seashells from the sea or something. But having your own place where you go and you connect in to that energy. In lots of Indigenous tribes, it starts out every morning. The Cherokee go to the river and they put themselves in the water and dunk themselves down 7 times for the 7 directions. I mean, there's all kinds of little simple things that we can do each day that connect us back to the earth or to the memories of our spirit and our ancestors, because that's what we want to take forth each day, is remembering that we're spirit, we're showing up here in a really good way. We're wanting to have a day where we, as a leader, we are leading and also finding a way to serve our communities.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Sharon. I always just feel like I'm getting stronger whenever you're speaking or even just show up. So I'm reflecting on one of the ceremonies I participated with you, and it was several times, but it was the pipe ceremony, which is my favorite. If you haven't had a chance to do a pipe ceremony with Sharon, I definitely suggest you connect with her, especially if you have an opportunity to go to her land to do this with her. It's transformational. But one thing that struck me that I actually see kind of get brought into schools or corporate America or even families, is this talking stick piece.
Right.
Neuroscience is teaching us that teams thrive, families thrive when there's equal airtime. People are given the opportunity to speak or not, but they're giving multiple opportunities to share, and ideally equal share time for all people, regardless of power, age. And I think in our culture, usually the leaders speak, and there's all these inherent rules: who speaks, who doesn't have permission to speak, and who listens, in families and in corporations. And so one of the cool things, amazing things, just witnessing how you use that talking stick to give everybody opportunity to regulate, co-regulate, to find their words. And you didn't just give them one chance, you gave them multiple chances. So anything you want to share about that practice and how to, maybe bring that in a bit more into our world?
Right. Well, I do think it's really important when you have a group of people that people get a chance to share. This sometimes is not comfortable for everyone, and I understand that. But allowing people to come back and creating, as long as you can continue to create a safe container, people will begin to open up. There's been many folks that have come to things that we have led in the past, or I've led, and they didn't share anything. But as time went on, they were feeling like they were safe and they wanted to lead. I do think being able to create that container with safety, and as a leader, we have to show vulnerability. I recently did a grief ceremony where, before we did the grief ceremony, I talked for about an hour about my losses. And I actually sobbed in front of 30 or more people that I did not know very well, and it didn't bother me in the least. I think some people were very surprised at that, and yet it also allowed them to see, wow, she's put herself in that vulnerable position, and so I can do that too. So it was really something that I didn't really pre-plan. I did plan to be vulnerable and share about some of my loss, some of my grief, and how I'd worked through some of that, and then allow them to participate in a ceremony and then come back and share with each other how that ceremony felt for them. Grief is something I do a lot of work around in this community, and I think it's something that we in the Western culture have a hard time with. You know, it's a hard thing. It's a hard space to be in, and when we're there, having a place that's safe is very important, I think. Mm-hmm.
Well, there's so much to what you shared, but I want to just add to that vulnerability piece. I think that's the power of sharing vulnerability, and then also showing and modeling how you're still strong and resilient, and you're able to come back to that place of wholeness and then teach. And I know that's why myself and many people have like fallen in love with your heart and your spirit, is because you have had very hard things and you've worked to overcome them, and you're transparent and vulnerable. And we have courage to face our own challenges and shadows. And when I think about the corporate work that we do, underneath a lot of the challenges that I love also working with leaders who have a lot of unprocessed trauma or pain, whether they're, fiery tempered or they're quick to cut, and when we really get into the transformative parts of them, it is the unprocessed grief. It's the way that they shoved everything down, and it kind of comes out when they tip over. And so you're really providing this invitation and shared space for people, especially leaders, to say, it is okay to share, in this right setting, especially with support. That's one thing I've learned from you that I think could also help leaders is, I can remember, training alongside of you, and you just coming up to me and say, I got you, I got your back. I'm energetically just supporting you. You're not alone. Even though you might be the one speaking alone and teaching alone, you are so not alone. I got you. I'm with you. And I had never experienced that in my entire life until I got a chance to co-train with you. And so that's one thing I've carried forward, is like letting people know who are training that feel like they're alone and they're leading, that they're not, that you're there. And so I just wanted to share that as well.
Right. And also being able to, I think you'll probably remember this incident, and it's something that I continue to use. Therapist, I used to do some work as a counselor or as a therapist in a group. One of the things they tell you to do is always to track people, pay attention to what people are doing, even if you don't say anything about it, but knowing where people are in the circle. And we were in a group where this young man continued to bring his guitar into the group. And nobody knew anything about him. He wouldn't share anything. He just brought his guitar every time. And so by the second day, I just said, hey, are you going to keep coming with that guitar? Or are you going to play it? And unbeknownst to us, this was a master musician that had had a tragic accident or illness that did not allow him to perform anymore, but he could still play music. He was very self-conscious because of his inability to speak as well. But when he started playing the guitar and singing, everybody started dancing and everybody started celebrating him. And see, that's what I think is so important, is pay attention. What if nobody ever said anything to him that weekend? He kept bringing that guitar because he wanted to be invited in. Sometimes when we're in a circle, people want us to notice something about them. They want us to pay attention to the fact that, they're showing up and they may, be looking down, or they may, be very sad or have tears in their eyes. They want us to notice that something's not right, or maybe something is really right, and we need to celebrate that. So I just think it's the thing that a leader has to do is track folks and be aware of what's happening in the circle at the same time while you're leading people. Sometimes it's a lot of energy that's going out there, but it really does pay off in the long run.
Well, and what I do remember that moment, and it was transformative moment for him and his wife and for the entire group. I have to be honest, there was like a 5-minute period where he was gathering the courage, and he tried and he almost just tucked himself out of it. And there was a lot of silence, and all of us were wondering if he was going to pull through and or if it would not work out. But you really kept the faith, and what you did is you gave space. And I think that's why, like, a lot of times as leaders, we can say, you got this, go for it. And then we give like a 20-second window before we're like, oh, they couldn't do it. We close the opportunity, and then we move on. And there's that freeze response. But you gave opportunity for the freeze response to kind of settle the group, to get coherence, to radiate him with positivity. And then he was able to kind of start, stop, and then kill it. And just bring us all up, But I think that little window from invitation to his working through his own emotions to get there was something that comes from a leader who has a deep well, a deep well of stability that allows someone to ground to them. And in Heart Math, we call it extending our coherence to them so that they can rise up to their occasion. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up. It's a beautiful example of how it can change.
I do think with leadership, it's real important to be able to know that you can sit in the silence and be okay. I used to work in men's prisons where, these men were already shut down. They didn't want to talk. They didn't want to, they just didn't want to share much of anything. But I used to tell them, okay, we're going to have group today, but we're going to sit in the circle. And if you don't feel like sharing, we're going to sit right here together. And we did, sometimes for 10 or 15 minutes. And it wasn't to try to push them into sharing. It was just, you've got the space here. It's safe. You don't have to do anything with it. Yeah. And so the expectation is not always you've got to perform or do something. What you want to do is allow people to just show up and be who they are and be okay. Because there's not a lot of places out there where we can just show up and just be okay without performing or somebody expecting something to happen. And when I'm sharing my story, I pause a lot. I stop a lot. I just let go and just let spirit take over. I just let that story be what it's supposed to be. And I don't feel like I have to be on performance mode all the time. And that's one of the things I think we can offer people.
Yeah. And I think one thing I noticed when working with you and seeing you work with teams and groups of people is how you really take the time to connect with the elements, as you were alluding to earlier. But not only do you just kind of mentally connect to them, I've seen you do it with such heartfelt presence that I've seen nature respond to you. I've seen the turkeys come in. I've seen the trees drop thousands of leaves just right after you honor the trees. I've seen for the first time ever, like, evidence that there is this connection that we can make as humans to the natural world, and that the natural world can respond in that container. And so for me, I'm not able, I can feel it with the wind sometimes, but for me, it's like if I'm getting ready to lead a group of people or have a hard conversation, it might be walking outside and putting my feet and hands in the earth, maybe just laying down and calling on the feeling of earth energy, of groundedness and courage of the sun, and water to allow emotions to roll through. And so I have kind of found my own way to do that, but you really, in a palpable way, when leading teams and groups, I think restore this like belief that has been taken from us, that we do have a living connection with our environment, and it does respond to our energy and also helps us. And I think that's a big thing for leaders, for every one of us, but for leaders and particularly to not feel so burdened and alone and trying to create like change in the
Right.
world. So any comments or thoughts on your journey to get there? Did that always come so easy to you, or did that grow with practice and time?
No, it has grown with time, practice, and age. And I think just realizing that people, when you're sitting in a circle, that space, the calmer that it can be, the more I can be in tune with the elements, and sometimes I think of myself as like a tree, and I'm just letting my roots go down, and I'm holding out the branches to embrace the circle and just let them grow the way they need to and do whatever it is that they need to do. I used to try to force so many things. I wanted things to happen. I was part of that same culture where, especially when I was working, the thing about it is it's always about data and it's about metrics. But if you can get to this place before that, you'll get your data and your metrics met. That's the thing about it. This is all the work you can do to make sure that people show up and give you all the best that they have.
One of the areas, thank you so much, Sharon. One of the areas that I know is near and dear to both of our hearts and also connected us in that, like within minutes of meeting each other, was just our passion for recovery work. Is there anything, for anyone listening today that has family or friends or even themselves is in recovery or want to be in recovery, how this work that you do and that you're offering can help strengthen their recovery process?
Yeah.
When I say recovery, from addiction and addiction specifically. Yeah.
Right. And yes, I was drawn to this work after I had been in the 12-step program for just a couple of years. My belief is that addiction is definitely of a spiritual matter. It's a spiritual disease. So the solution is a spiritual solution. So being able to find something that people can connect with spiritually is always a good thing. I think a lot of the circles that I do have a lot of people from the 12-step program, or a month or so ago, we did a rites of passage 4-day process for people from a treatment center. And I think a lot of folks are starting to realize that those are things that allow people to get vulnerable quicker, make some connections easier, lay down some of the barriers and some of the challenges that they might have. So, yeah, I think there's a lot in this work that speaks to people who are struggling out there with addictions and that are looking for a place where they can do this work and connect with other people.
Yeah, I just want to echo in my work around addictions, and that's even working like with the executives at the executive level. As people move up in leadership, they become more isolated, more vulnerable, really more careful about everything that they say and who it will get around to, what will impression managing, right? Because their words carry so much weight and can be shared out of context. And so there's less community as we typically grow up within any organization or into leadership. But also around addiction in particular, there's so much shame involved in that. And we know that shame fuels addiction, and we know that loneliness fuel isolation is the worst condition for humans. And so when I'm talking with folks who are struggling with addiction, they'll say loneliness is my biggest trigger, isolation. And I feel like what you're providing also is opportunities for people to get that deep connection with spirit and with each other in community in a way that is substance free, and so it's such a beautiful, deep service offering that you're doing. And I'm so grateful again that you're bringing this medicine to the world.
Well, thank you. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate that. Yes.
So a couple more questions. I want to honor your time. I want to just ask if there's anything personal on your own personal journey that you feel like called to share. I know you had spent some time in Africa with your teacher. You mentioned kind of that near death experience. Not sure if that's appropriate to go into on any level here, but just want to invite you if there's anything that you would like people to know about your journey and your life and your learnings. This would be an opportunity to share even more.
Sure, that's great. Well, the thing about it is the learning goes on, for me anyway. So, I also like to go to other ceremonies and other rituals that people are holding so that I'm not always the one holding space. It feeds me up and fills me up. And yes, the, transition of a near-death experience back in 2009 has been a marker in time for me looking at my transcendence process and being able to step into this work and know how important it is for me. And it's become more and more important for me. This summer I've spent a lot of time not traveling far, but just from different communities doing things around grief ritual, doing that rock ceremony, sharing with other people, and then allowing people to share, part of their journeys and process with me. And so, yeah, I really am grateful for the fact that what this is allowing me to do is I'm continuing to grow. I have to. I know that as a spiritual leader or a leader of any type, you don't have to walk in integrity, but I have found for me that it is important for me to do the work that allows me to be that type of leader. I don't want folks to necessarily just follow me. I want them to find a place within themselves to follow. But if they are working with me, I want them to be able to step away and know that the work I provide comes from my spirit, which is offering integrity and purity in a clear, safe space.
Yes. And I think everyone can feel that when, they even just get the blessing to gaze into your eyes for just a few moments. And one of, I think, the things that, and I'm not sure if it came from that moment where you had to forgive the great tragedies that happened towards you and your people, but you have also as a leader, a community leader, you are always forgiving. You're forgiving and you're inviting people into forgiveness, and you're giving people permission to be forgiven for their ancestors. I can remember in a big group session that I was part of, that you were leading, how many people cried around their own self-hatred, their own guilt that they were carrying. And not only did you gracefully just invite in forgiveness, but you gave permission for us all to forgive each other ongoing. And I think, in leaders, when I work with teams, people can hold grudges for 20 years and kind of thwart each other. And then their teams have struggles. And what ceremony, I found that being part of what ceremony does, it gets so deep. Like you said, the shared witnessing of vulnerability, but it's so deep that you don't have to work at it as hard. It's like a self-cleaning or washing in some way. So anything you can share about forgiveness and your experience, because that is the one word that I said emanates out of you pretty consistently. Yeah.
It's folks. So funny. This past month, a lot of forgiveness has been talked about in the circles I've been in. And, it's not easy. I mean, I'm like anyone else. I can get to a place and get angry at something and hold on to a grudge or get mad. But also you realize that what you do is you cut off the sunlight of the spirit when you do those types of things to yourself. And when that sunlight of the spirit is cut off, then you don't get to grow as much. You don't get to feel as much. You don't get to have that joy. So it's really important to be able to constantly I guess what I do is have some accountability partners where I'm talking to people about these things, where I can be myself when I'm not in public and talk about things that I or people or issues that I have where I'm not in forgiveness. And so that I can work
Mm-hmm.
through that process. I do this type of
Mm-hmm.
work on a daily basis. So that's one way that, yeah, it's really easy to, keep it going. But you got to find, even when I was working, I still work in business, but when I was working as a director of a lot of nonprofits, the thing I found that was really good for me was to have some business coaches or mentors, places where we feel like as leaders that we can go and talk about things and share about things in a way and have somebody to keep that confidential as we work through our own process.
Yeah, that confidentiality piece I think is so important, in the non-judgment, the
Yes.
non-judgment that people are in, like you said, in process, working towards something. They're just not quite there yet. We're lucky enough at the Moksha group to have, asked Sharon to work with teams who are really committed to doing things outside of the box, and also do individual personal coaching work for folks who really want to do this deeper grief work or ceremonial work. And she also has her own nonprofit, outside of doing like the Moksha work and working with the folks we work with, where she's doing amazing work worldwide. And so how can people, if there's teams or groups of people who are interested in through the Moksha group, please just check out our website, read about Sharon. She offers amazing individual coaching as well as team trainings and corporate kind of team trainings. And it's extraordinary. And she's also doing work with her nonprofit. Can you tell us a little bit about your sacred nonprofit and how people can make a donation or support your work or just get involved and get connected to you? Because I have people reach out to me and say, how do I connect to her? And
Yes.
so,
Well, thank you.
yeah, to
I
that.
really appreciate that. That's really wonderful. Yeah, Medicine Wheel Way is 8 acres of land that is here in the mountains of Western North Carolina. It's a beautiful property that is being maintained by my partner and myself, and we have set up a nonprofit that allows us to have this land set aside so that all people can come together. And our mission is to allow people to experience nature and the elements, connect through Indigenous culture and ceremonies so that they can better, connect with communities and healing. We do have a Facebook page. Right now we're getting a website worked on. And we also have, we're always doing donations through PayPal at Medicine Wheel Way, and that's just medicine, WHEELWAY, all one word. And yes, we are always grateful. We are a nonprofit and can provide anyone with, the EIN number that they need to take this donation off their taxes. And the community here has been so supportive. We've been very grateful as we continue to make progress in this land that is set aside for community use.
Yeah, and even folks can, as benefactors, can, sponsor, young people to come in and go through the rites of passage work, or, benefactors to support your work for people who can't. I know for you, what I've learned is, you're passionate about working with the BIPOC community and finding ways for people to have this healing work for little to no cost out of their pocket. And so part of that is finding people who do have a means, who believe in this work and can support that. So there's many ways to get involved and support Sharon. I'm always inviting her here to come to St. Louis. We sure need this type of healing work in our community. And so I'll continue to invite and all those who can have any opportunity to be in ceremony. I find it so healing, and I've never met anyone who hasn't. And so thank you, Sharon. Is there any last words? Maybe you can Can you close us out in some way that they think would be good for the group? Because I love your openings and closings. So if I can put you on the spot and ask you to close us out, and all the listeners out there, I would be grateful.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm really grateful and honored to have been here today. It's always great to be able to talk about this work and talk about how, we can all work together and hopefully bring some healing to ourselves and to this planet, to Mother Earth. And so I guess, what I would say is just my own prayer of, I say Ahoma Takuyasan, which is all my relations. So we are all related on one level or another. And we are also related to these beautiful elements that we are trying to protect and support, to continue to be there for our children and our grandchildren. And so, there is a prayer that the Native people say, to Creator, help me to be willing to walk the Broken Beauty Trail. That is a trail that where we are seeing that even though in our brokenness we are still beautiful, the world is still beautiful. We have so much hope in our hopelessness, and that we learn that our biggest enemy is not other people, but ourselves. And if we do that work on ourselves, then we'll find out that we have no enemy. So thank you again, Sheila and the Moksha Group, for having me here today. I'm looking forward to a long working relationship with all of you. And I'm very honored to know that you're trying to support this type of work.
Much love, sending my heart love to you. And until to see each other in the flesh, lots of love.
Yes.
And many blessings to you. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.